When I went home for 3 weeks about a month and a half ago, my dad and I decided we should do a bit of night fishing. I'm not a huge fan of night fishing, or any sort of fishing, or my dad for that matter. Our personalities are way too similar, and if you leave us together for more than an hour, there may be blood left over by the time he and I are done playing several dozen rounds of fisticuffs between the stubborn arguing and shouting. Anyways, Dad decided to take me to this river up by our new house that they had just finished building. My mom and brother stayed behind while we made our way through the dark woods. Now my family lives in Oregon, and the river was about 1.5 miles from my family's property, over massive fallen trees and stumps that I could easily trip on. Not knowing the lay of the land, my dad merely scoffed at me and reminded me that city living makes you soft. He didn't use those words exactly, just something along those lines, like some stereotypical cowboy from a Western film. I blame the fact that I didn't know this area as well as he did, and things just spiraled downhill from there, and arguing broke out between us, making the peaceful night loud and chaotic. We didn't stop arguing the entire way down to the river, my father critiquing my less than Christian lifestyle, while I criticized his manner of parenting my 20-year-old autistic brother. By the time we got to the river, we finally settled into an awkward, tense silence as we got our gear out. I knew that this fight was far from over as I sat down on a fallen stump, freezing my ass off. I had lived in a warm climate for over a year, and honestly, coming out here was probably his way of punishing me for leaving the Pacific Northwest. We refused to talk to each other as our lights danced across the water. Then my dad suddenly stood up, his light landing on the other side of the river. There, on the other bank, stood a man, looking right at us. He wore a bright orange t-shirt and a pair of scraggly jeans. For the most part, he was pretty average looking, except for the machete that was hanging off his belt. My dad snapped at me to start packing up all of our things, and so I followed his command as my dad started shouting something at the man across the river. Their conversation was mostly lost to the roar of the white-capped river, but I could see the man making agitated sweeps with his hand every time I looked up. Their voices grew louder, and my fear grew with it. My father has never been one to carry protection in the woods, hence why I was born. This man was armed and possibly dangerous with that machete, and while we had a river between us, it was shallow and had plenty of places to cross. I had no doubts this man could be behind us in mere minutes. Had we wandered onto his property by mistake and just didn't know about it? "Drop the gear and let's go," my dad snarled at me as I took one last look up to see the man starting to walk in the water. My dad then put a firm hand on my shoulder and led me back into the woods toward our house. My dad is an ultra-marathoner. He runs like it's going out of style, and my mostly out-of-shape self probably wouldn't have been able to keep up. I couldn't hear if the man was coming after us. My heart was beating so loud in my ears, but I followed my dad so closely, I almost ran into him several times. Finally, we found our road and made a break back for my parents' house. As soon as we were through the front door, my dad had all the doors locked and was keeping watch out the windows, making sure no crazy men with machetes were creeping up to our house. Finally, when we figured out there were no men wearing orange t-shirts out there, we sat down and began to talk about our experience with my mom. We left at the part where we had been arguing, but told her everything else. We went to bed that night without apologizing. The next day, with the only gun he owned, my father and I walked back out into the woods after calling the police. They said that there was a man who enjoyed scaring people off the forest land, and that we shouldn't be too concerned about it. Feeling a bit sheepish, we went back to the place where we had left our gear, both of us apologizing for our lackluster behavior the night before. When we got back to what we believed to be the spot, we saw our fishing poles had been bent and the lines had been draped from tree to tree. The tackle box was gone. The good news is, me and my dad didn't fight again for the rest of my trip home.
In December one year, my mom, dad, baby sister, and I went to stay with some family who lived up north. It never snowed where I lived, but during our stay, an awesome snowstorm rolled through and dumped several inches on the neighborhood. Our whole family went out to play, make snow angels and snowmen and all that typical stuff, but it soon devolved into a snowball fight between me and my cousin Leo. Within seconds, my baby sister started crying because she almost got hit, so we were ordered to go down the street. I didn't know where it was okay to go, but I just followed Leo's lead. I had a pretty good arm for playing baseball, so he was on the run from me. Eventually, he tried to lose me by ducking into a stand of trees. He weaved through the shrubs and bushes with surprising ease, but I had trouble keeping up. By the time I emerged into the clearing on the other side, I couldn't see him anymore. I froze, suddenly realizing I didn't know where I was and had lost the only person guiding me. I got my bearings and tried not to freak out, thinking Leo still had to be around. I was standing in the front yard of a house, one like any other in that neighborhood. Large, 2-story, big yard with a car out front, though a little worse for wear, and a complete lack of any holiday decorations. When I looked down at my feet, I saw footprints cutting across the yard. They couldn't have been anyone else's but Leo's. I followed his exact path, first making a straight line for the house before curving away from the front porch, hugging the side of the wall and making my way toward the backyard. As I rounded the corner to the back of the house, I expected Leo to be there waiting for me, ready to jump out and scare me or nail me in the face with a snowball. But his trail ended, and nobody was there. I looked all around, not seeing any sign of him. He couldn't have jumped anywhere or been able to cover his tracks so quickly in the perfect blanket of snow over the ground, so there was only one place he could have gone: inside the house. Now, initially, this wasn't as frightening as it should have been. After all, I didn't know anybody there, but maybe Leo knew the people that lived in that house and hid in there to freak me out. I was standing about 6 feet from the back door, right about where Leo's tracks ended, so I figured that's how he must have gotten in. Hoping this was all still part of our game, I knocked on the back door and shouted, "Come on out, Leo! I know you're in there!" My plan was to turn it around on him and freak him out, but when I heard nothing but silence, my stomach dropped. I started to think I screwed up and banged on some random stranger's door. Then, as the panic was taking over, the door clicked and slowly opened inward, revealing a dark, unlit interior. Hiding behind the door, peeking around the edge, was the bone-thin face of a woman. Her sunken eyes showed as much fear as they did malice, and they petrified me. Inside, I heard whispering from someone else, but it wasn't Leo. It sounded like multiple people. I remember imagining what it looked like in there, and all I could see was a pit of snakes. I stood there, unable to move for maybe 10 seconds, before the woman stepped out from behind the door into clear view.
"Would you like to join us?"
I could barely hear what she was saying because she was completely naked, standing in the bitter cold, looking halfway between dead and alive. Unable to think of a response, I tore my eyes away from the horrible sight of her and stared into the house. There, as my eyes adjusted to the dark, or perhaps as the light shifted, I saw my cousin's face, not 10 feet away. He was inside that house, with all those people, however many there were, whatever they were or weren't wearing, and the look on his face was somehow even more haunting than what I had just seen. Despite not wanting to acknowledge the woman in my field of vision, I saw her scrawny, wrinkly arm reach out to grab me. I panicked and finally ran for my life. I sprinted down the street, almost getting lost on the way back to my cousin's house, but then I found my family and frantically told them what was happening. The adults took me and packed me into the big SUV parked in the driveway. Then I directed them to the house. Before we got there, we ran into Leo. He was walking down the middle of the street, just a block away from the house, still wearing that same shell-shocked expression. However, the car outside and all the people inside were gone. There was nobody to report. The house was vacant. Leo's parents said the bank foreclosed on it nearly a year ago, and it had been sitting on the market ever since. I never had a clue. The for sale sign had been knocked down and buried in the snowfall, and I never got close enough to see the busted lockbox on the front door, which meant the key had been stolen by those freaks. We don't know how long they were living in there, but it couldn't have been that long with their car sitting out front. As for my cousin, he said he was, in fact, waiting behind the house to scare me when the door suddenly opened and he was pulled inside. He was frozen in shock the entire time, but then, after I ran away, the junkies panicked and forgot about him as they fled, so he just walked out. He never wanted to go into detail about anything else. As far as we know, nothing physically happened to him. He wasn't beaten or touched or anything like that, but the things he must have seen in there, I just can't imagine. I mean, I did get a taste of it myself, and it certainly scarred me for life, but Leo's experience must have been so much worse. Honestly, I think I'm better off not knowing the rest.
This went on for over the course of a year, with the last incident taking place in December of 2016. I used to own this green 1998 Toyota Camry. It was my grandmother's until she gifted it to my parents, who eventually gave it to me as my first car. It was nice and reliable. But I have this bad habit of letting my cars accumulate a bunch of stuff before cleaning them out. Since I still lived with my parents, they would use the car from time to time if they needed. One day, I noticed a bunch of fishing lines with hooks on them in the back of my car. On one of those rare occasions that I actually cleaned it out, a bunch of hooks were embedded into the upholstery, and more are between the creases on the seat. It takes me a while to get them all out, almost pricking myself several times while doing it. I have no idea how long they were there, as the last time I had cleaned my car out was months ago. At any rate, I'm annoyed. At first, I thought my dad had put them in there, as he had recently used this car to transport a bunch of old junk for a garage sale. But when I asked him about it, he told me that he's never seen any fishing hooks or lines in any of the old stuff of ours, and nobody in my family even fishes, so it wouldn't make any sense for us to have it. He's also the only other person that has used my car in the past year or two. I'm the kind of person who locks everything every night. I triple check my car doors, and if I'm even a little uncertain as to whether or not I locked up, I will go back to my car and check, despite any inconvenience. I also park it where I can see it from my bedroom window and hear if anyone is tampering with it, so I doubt anyone could have broken in, and I just assumed Dad missed it and didn't think any more of it. Until a month later, when I found even more fishing hooks in my back seat. At this point, I asked my dad about it again, but he figured that I was either pulling a weird prank on him or someone is breaking into my car. I wonder why, though, they would break into my car, not steal anything out of it, and leave fishing hooks inside. It just didn't make any sense to me. To give you an idea about how weird this is, I live in a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, and even have a private Facebook group that started because of a drug house at the end of the street cropping up, though at this point it was no longer there. The group became sort of a neighborhood watch that always posts whenever something suspicious happens around here. So there isn't any neighbors I don't know for miles, and none of the ones I do know would do something this shady. Again, without any explanation or clear motive, it fades into the back of my mind as the days and weeks pass. I eventually get a new job selling mattresses, as I had been unemployed focusing on school for a while. I move out of my parents' house to go live with my girlfriend, and this is where things turn from weird to extremely unsettling. One night, we decide to go to a nearby store to get something to make food with. When I notice in my back seat, there was a bunch of fishing lines and hooks again. Startled, I looked around for any sign of anyone being nearby. I told my girlfriend to go back into the house, and I sit up and stare at my car from our bedroom window until morning comes. I don't see anyone or anything. That morning, I get ready for work, and my girlfriend gets ready for college courses, and we leave. The store I was working at during this time had this weird L-shaped design to it, with 2 separate entrances and a cafe taking up the space in between them. There was one entrance that was easily visible from the front desk, and another that you would have to get up and go see. As I was closing up for the night after the last incident, I go to turn off the open signs and see in the center of the obscured hallway an entire roll of fishing line coiled up, with part of the line leading to the door where a pile of hooks sat. I had no customers that day and didn't hear the alarm going off. I then noticed that someone had turned the door alarms off, but neither I nor my only coworker had ever tampered with that device before, and it was behind the front desk. I was shaking. Someone had been stalking me and leaving these hooks and lines for me to see, but I had no idea what to do. Call the police? Other than the fishing lines and hooks, there was really nothing to trace back to anyone. My store had no security cameras. Corporate would never agree to install them. I figured the best I could do would be to not appear as frightened as I was, in case whoever was doing this was watching and recording me. I thought that if seeing something like this didn't make me go about my day differently, and I wouldn't give whatever reaction this person was looking for, they would just give up and go away. For several more months, I would find fishing lines and hooks in my car, despite it being locked, and my parents, being the only people with extra keys, being much too busy with the construction of their new house and their jobs to take time out of their day to prank me. Once or twice, I would leave notes in my car asking whoever it was why they were doing this, and to please stop. I would find the notes were gone whenever the lines and hooks reappeared, but never got a response. Eventually, after a series of misunderstandings and disagreements with my girlfriend's family, I decided to move out of my girlfriend's house and rented out an apartment with a couple of my friends until my parents' new house could be completed. The very last time I had an encounter with the lines and the hooks, I came home from work to find them strewn about the living room. Stuff had been knocked over, and a few things were broken. However, nothing was taken. My friend, his girlfriend, and their baby were gone at the time, so no one was there when this happened, except for the cats, who were absolutely spooked and wouldn't come out from under the bed for hours. To this day, I still don't know what this person wanted, why they were stalking me in the first place, or what the fishing lines and hooks meant. No one that I know is into fishing at all, and I don't go out of my way to make enemies or cross people. I honestly don't know if this person was someone I knew, or a stranger who was very good at covering their tracks. What I know for sure is that I will have anxiety for the rest of my life over this, and I routinely stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning, because in addition to several other traumatizing experiences, this has made every bump in the night a potential threat for me. It's been about 10 years since I've seen anything more from this person, but instead of feeling reassured that it's finally over, I feel more uneasy that someone has followed me through the many changes in my life. Anyways, I hope you enjoy listening. I'm shaking as I type this out. I haven't really talked about it in great detail to anyone, because simply describing it makes me feel like a lunatic. Not only that, but I don't want to worry my friends and family when there's nothing that they can do about it. This will likely be a mystery that will never be solved.